Oh, we waited all year for this, it turns out. Tonight, NHL playoff hockey, the Tampa Bay Lightning hosting the Florida Panthers. The winner advances automatically to the NHL Stanley Cup final. At least that's the way it's been the last few years, and it might be again. Can't wait for this. We're going to talk to Eduardo Encina of the Tampa Bay Times. He covers the Lightning for us on TampaBay.com as well. Get his insights into the playoffs, and great story he did on Andrei Vasilevskiy and his ability to overcome what was a really significant injury, even though he played through it a year ago. So lots coming up with Eduardo Encina in just a second. We've got the Bucs draft getting ever so closer. We had a chance to talk to Calijah Kancey and Yaya Diaby and some of the guys over there the first day of OTAs. We'll get into that in just a second. But first, I want to remind you guys to go see our friends at Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. If you're looking for the greatest timepiece you'll ever have, the Breitling Company has been in business for over 140 years. They make the best Switch watches you can find anywhere. And Breitling Boutique is a unique store. It's in the middle of the mall at International Plaza. You go upstairs. You're going to love the customer service. They're used to all kinds of high-profile clients like NFL athletes and football players, the Bucs. You'll see a few of those guys in there from time to time, but they're going to treat you just like the celebrity that you are. And you're going to enjoy seeing the great selection of watches they have, the Navitimers, the Chronomats for the men. And then, of course, they also have women's watches, sports watches that are very durable for your wife, for your girlfriend, all kinds of colored wristbands to go with that. They've also got a special collection of the NFL's 32 teams watches, and this is in sort of concert with the league's anniversary, 104th year anniversary that's been going on for some time. While supplies last, all 32 teams have a special Chronomat watch. They got the color of the team on the face of the watch, the logo. You have to see these things. Go to TampaBay.com. You'll see one of the Buccaneers on our website. It's Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. You're going to love the store. You're going to even love what you wear on your wristband and that timepiece that you walk out with even more. It's Breitling Boutique. Let them know that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. We got Lightning-Panthers talk in just a minute with Ed Encina, but I was over at the Bucs. They had their first day of OTA, some availability with the media. Biggest takeaway, Steve Versnick, was this. Calijah Kancey, who we know has now had calf injuries on both legs each season to start the year and wasn't able to begin the year on time, had to recover from that. Obviously, he's had good production when he's been in there. He told us that if he stays healthy for 17 games, he believes he will lead the league in sacks, and he was not smiling when he said it. He seemed rather serious about it. Now, I like confident players, but that would put him in the Aaron Donald realm, if you will. And, of course, when he went to Pitt, he was compared to Aaron Donald a lot because of his body type and that sort of thing. Like or dislike that Calijah Kancey is willing to say he could lead the team in sacks if he plays 17 games or lead the league.
I'm glad to know we're going to have the second Defensive Player of the Year from the Buccaneers in history. Derek Brooks is the only one, correct?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Shaq Barrett led the league with 19 and a half one year and set a club record. He didn't win Player of the Year.
But if you do it from Calijah Kancey's spot,
oh my God, yes,
you're Defensive Player of the Year, no question.
Yeah, no question.
So Derek Brooks, Calijah Kancey.
Who thought that, right?
Yep. Yeah, go ahead and put him up for the Ring of Honor now. No, look. He was asked, and in context, the question was, hey, if you play the whole season, what do you expect your sack totals or something along those lines?
Yeah.
And you want your players to be confident.
Sure you do.
He didn't just come out and say, by the way, if I play 17, I'm the sack leader. But they asked, or, you and the rest of the media, they're asked him, what do you expect this year? And he expects to lead the league in sacks. I like that confidence out of a guy. Now, the question with him isn't ability, although it's can he be healthy? Can he start the season on time? Forget about playing 17. Can you get to game 1, which he hasn't done yet?
That's correct.
Not healthy. So, but you don't want him going in going, I hope to get 4 or 5 sacks.
Right. Now, what's the number he'd be happy with? Double digits, you might hear. The question was asked in this context: what happens if Calijah? If you suit up for all 17 games next year, and he goes, this year, if I do that, I think you'll be looking at the sack leader. And he says, you lead the Bucs in Tampa Bay or lead the league? He goes, the league. And he goes, hey, we're going to compete. Why not go for it? So yeah, it's confidence. It's a little bit of bravado. But when he does play, when he is healthy, when he's productive, he's very productive. He's hard to block. He's got a lot of speed. He's playing next to a guy in Vita Vea with a ton of power. It's the perfect combination in many ways because Vita will push the pocket, occupy two blockers minimum, and still get the quarterback to have to move right or left. And Calijah has the closing speed and the ability to use his hands and get off blocks, and he can make tackles in the backfield, including that of the quarterback. So I do think if he were healthy for an entire season, he could get. I don't know if he's going to lead the league. I think that would be incredible if he did, and extremely rare. If he calls his shot, so be it. But I think he's somebody that could get close to 10 sacks at the defensive tackle position, which is not easy to do. It's not a high sack, position. Warren Sapp's the best I ever saw do it, obviously, as far as the Bucs go. But yeah, that would be quite a year. Look, him and Vita are a force. I've never understood. Even though Yaya Diaby last year, saw a lot of extra tight ends chipping on him and running backs. I don't think they was worried about Joe Tryon Shawinka. They handled him one-on-one. But I find it hard to believe that those outside linebackers don't just, walk into 10 sacks a year because the quarterbacks can't step up in the pocket. They can't. You've got Calijah. You've got Vita. They have to roll right or left, and they should be running right into the arms of one of those outside linebackers. So, and then if those guys get upfield, now you got the guys inside, crawling up in their feet, and quarterbacks hate to have guys by their feet, so they can end up with a lot of sack. I mean, it was the way that Simeon Rice and Warren Sapp did this for many, many years in the Bucs' old defense under Tony Dungy, and it worked beautifully. So I like the guy. I like his confidence. I think he's a really good player. But your best ability is availability, and he has done some stuff in training camp both years. Here's what I would say about that, and I'm not a doctor, believe me, but I did live in Florida my whole life. And I think that when you're in that heat and you're close to 300 pounds or thereabouts, and you're losing so many fluids, and I know they measure these guys' hydration levels and all that, but soft tissue injuries happen when you get cramps, when you get dehydrated. So as much as they can possibly keep Calijah Kancey cool and hydrated, that should be the goal this year. Those trainers is let's try to prevent these soft tissue injuries that keep getting him and other players too as well. We had a lot of hamstrings last year. And it's just, it's sort of unavoidable because they're losing so many fluids. They don't have enough time to put them back in because you're back out there for another 2 hours tomorrow. So that's going to be job one, I think, and it was unfortunate because like one of the last practices before the preseason or the regular season that he got hurt last year. So hopefully that won't happen to him again. But yeah, Calijah Kancey leading the league in sacks at D tackle, man. I'm here for that. That would be wild. All right, this is what we've been waiting for. The Tampa Bay Lightning host the Florida Panthers. And if you've heard that before in the NHL playoffs, it's because it seems to happen every year. Eduardo Encina joins us now, who covers the Lightning for the Tampa Bay Times. Eddie, I don't know, man. It just seems like, whoever wins this round is probably going to end up in the Stanley Cup final. Isn't that the way it goes?
That's been the recent history for sure, Rick. Yeah, what has it been? It seems that what is it? The past 4 or 5 years that
incredible.
The winner of this game matchup has gone on. It's good and it's bad because each time I think the Panthers were a President's Trophy winner one year. The Lightning had some good teams, and it's kind of an unfortunate part of the playoff format is that one of these teams that is a verge of 100-point seasons is going to be eliminated in the first round. But like you said, it has been a kind of a springboard to bigger things for whoever wins this series.
It's good news for you if you win. It's definitely a harbinger maybe of things to come. I wanted to talk about some of the stories you've written. One in particular, which I thought was outstanding, Eduardo, on Andrei Vasilevskiy. And as he approaches another Stanley Cup run here, I thought I knew a lot about him and a lot about his injury. It turns out I didn't know a whole much at all. You had a chance to talk to him about this, and boy, we saw him play last year. Clearly, he was not the Andrei Vasilevskiy of old, and he did not play the way he is playing now. But in your discussions with him, it became blatantly clear that he was essentially out there, he said, kind of one-legged for much of the year. Just tell me what you learned about Vasilevskiy and this injury and just how debilitating and difficult it was for him to try to play through it.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot just from talking to him. I don't think many people have really talked about the injury,
Right.
and I don't think many people have really, he's really kind of sat down with many people. It's fortunate when you're on the road sometimes with a team.
Sure.
I was able to grab him. I think in Buffalo a few weeks ago, he had an off day, so it was just basically a work day for him, and no bus to catch or anything like that. So we just sat down for a good 20 minutes and talked about it. He was really open about everything that he was dealing with last year, and we rewind a little bit to 2 years ago. He had talked about how, he hadn't just kind of felt himself, that he was battling his body, and that really had nothing to do with basically what happened, 2 summers ago, which is basically, he hurt himself, doing some powerlifting drills in the off season. One thing that Vasi is he's super committed to his off season routines, and a lot of for many years it involved just kind of more reps, more weight, powerlifting, a lot of squats, and that like he kind of hurt himself a couple summers ago, and uh, I think they tried to get through it, going into camp that year, and they just couldn't. He came off the ice, first practice of training camp that year, and a few days later, he was getting surgery on his lower back to kind of replace a herniated bulging disc in his back there. So, and I wasn't aware of how much he was really battling that all season. You kind of thought he had surgery, he came back, he's okay. But
Yeah.
when you look at his numbers, it really was statistically his worst year he's ever had last year. And obviously he's he set a really high bar for himself. I think most goaltenders might take those numbers that he had
Yeah, they
last year,
would.
but
Yeah.
but by his means, and he, like I said, he was very honest about it, just basically saying that there's so much pressure on that on that nerve,
Right.
that kind of basically shot down the right side of his body from the waist down to his toes, that he really couldn't put pressure on it. And for a goaltender, that your legs and your mobility and your flexibility, everything from your waist down is so important, along with your back. It's he was really playing, like, again, like those are his words, playing on one leg, and it's pretty remarkable that he actually got through it, and really no one really knew about it for the most part. And even now, he said, I'm still not 100% healed from this. And the joke that he kind of made, and it was a great quote. He was like, hopefully, my save percentage can go up 2 more% this year, and 2 more% next year,
Hmm.
and 2 more% the year after that, as this thing starts to heal. And it's amazing to hear him talk about, really that, he hopes that his best hockey is ahead of him as this injury kind of continues to heal, especially considering what he's done in his career, which is, pretty much, I think, a lock Hall of Fame career, already. So, but to fast forward to this year, going to the playoffs, I think we saw, a healthy version of him, the best, a clear mind. He felt good about his body. I think that's huge for him. And obviously, the physical part of it is starting to take care of itself. We've seen basically his best numbers of his career in the regular season. And, again, moving forward, I think for him, like, so yeah, I think in the room when you're around him every day, you kind of notice a different guy. He's really kind of, a lot more laid back, a lot more easygoing. I don't know if he would have sat down with me for 25 minutes a couple years ago, and and been that open about it. But I think that's a part of him going through this, a part of an indication of how clear his mind is, and also just kind of knowing that still at the same time that it's a long road ahead here, whether long term and short term. Short term thinking about the playoffs, and it's important for him to have his tank filled both physically and mentally. But if there's anyone who knows the grind and what it takes to to get through those, what is it, 20, 24, 27 games, whatever it is, to take you to a Stanley Cup, it's definitely him. So, but it was pretty fascinating to hear him talk so bluntly about how much he did deal with last year. It's just kind of also that, he's he's still kind of, it's a lot better now, significantly better as the numbers show. But still, even now, that he's still in process of getting better to what I think he would say 100%.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, if not for Connor Hellenbach, I mean, he would be probably the Vezina
Yeah.
Trophy leader, no question about that. But we know what he can do, what he's capable of doing in the postseason. I thought it was interesting when he told you, of course, he's ditched the weightlifting, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's more about martial arts and mobility, and that seems to have really turned the corner for him.
Yeah, I think it's ditching the weights, and working more on, working from your own weight,
Right,
and
right.
the mobility and stuff like that. So he kind of joked around saying like, I love weightlifting, I love powerlifting, but I can do that when I'm retired. I don't need my back. So the one thing about Vasilevsky too is he's a really funny dude. He's good for a couple really good quips every time you talk to him. I don't think that really comes across too much when in like the interviews you see with him on post game or anything like that. But he's a hilarious dude. I think most of the guys in the room, most of his teammates see that. But yeah, I mean, the way that he termed it to me was because once he said martial arts, I think kind of like my ears perked up, and I was like, what do you mean? I mean, he's like, no, it's not like Bruce Lee. It's more like Jean-Claude Van Damme, with the legs between the two chairs
Right.
and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the way he describes it. He also kind of describes it as quote unquote goalie nerd stuff. So this is stuff, when you actually look for it, more is like a lot of goaltenders, including Sergei Bobrovsky, have kind of changed their routines from this heavy lifting kind of routines to more kind of martial arts mobility stuff. I mean, Bobrovsky basically remade himself, I think, a couple of off seasons ago with a coach that was specializing in a certain kind of martial arts. So it is something that is becoming much more prominent in goaltenders in terms of their training. And for him, it was, finding a coach down here in Tampa, staying down here, which is, another thing that was different. He usually kind of goes back and forth between here and Russia in the off season. But, this past, summer, he felt good. He wanted to stay down there. He wanted to try this new kind of routine. And obviously it's paid off for him. He still kind of goes back to it every once in the regular season. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely, but I think also too it's kind of a sign of just his maturity. Like I think that as a goaltender, as a big guy like he is, you just kind of think to yourself, it's always more, push, push, push. And I think he's kind of learned how to maybe take a little bit of step back and like understanding what's best for his body, especially as he he's approached that 30-year mark for a lot of goaltenders. That's kind of when they start to decline. But obviously for Vasilevsky, he recognizes that he's got to be a little bit different in his preparation than maybe he has been. And like I said, I think that shows a little bit sign of his maturity and how committed he is to the longevity of his career.
It sounds a lot like a 40-something-year-old quarterback I covered with all the plyometrics and the stretching and stuff like
Right.
that. It's absolutely true. You get to be the tin man as you get older. I can tell you that for sure. I love this quote from him. He's talking about how they played better since the Four Nations face-off break as a team defensively. This is maybe my favorite quote. I'm not a big strategy guy. Usually I don't even know what we're talking about during the meeting. My job is simple. You stop the pucks you see. The ones you don't see, you hope they will hit you. But the guys are executing the game plan. That's the result. So keep it simple, man. Just,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, like, and that's the thing is like, I mean, like, I think sometimes we maybe overthink it. And for a guy with his skill and his acumen, I think that, sometimes, it is that simple, I mean, and make no mistake, a big part of the success that he's had has been, the guys playing much better in front of him, I
No
mean,
question.
it's really been night and day in terms of what we saw last year from them defensively. And this year, numbers, everything, in terms of just the way you watch them play, the way they protected the middle of the ice, and really let him see the puck. And like he said, it's like he's like it's not that simple. See, it's pretty simple when you think about it. It's see puck, stop puck, and but again, like I think he was the first one to kind of give the guys in front of him credit too, in terms of they're protecting me, they're blocking shots when they need to, but they're also letting me see the puck. I'm not getting screened and blocked and everything like that in front, which is obviously big for him because if you watch him play, he's everything that he does is all his eyesight is so big. His seeing the puck is big for him. He loves to see. He loves to get a lot of shots. He loves to see a lot of shots.
Sure.
He'll tell you that if he has a game where he goes an entire period where it's he only sees one or two shots, he doesn't feel great about him. Just about where he's at. So he thrives on seeing the puck and seeing a lot of shots, but obviously he wants to see them. So, but like you said, he does definitely make it sound a little bit more simple than we all think about it, especially when we see the dynamic plays that he makes sometimes. Going post to post or stopping guys glove side or everything like that we've kind of learned to see from him, especially this time of the year with when the games are really, really important.
Yeah, something else that you mentioned that has helped him obviously is the defense in front of him. And you wrote a story about the reunion, if you will, between Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough. Ryan McDonough might well be in some ways the MVP of this team because that's just completely changed how they're playing defensively. Just in addition to the leadership, but to have that much playoff experience between those two guys, what has it done to settle down that back end?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think one big thing that you saw last year was a little bit of panic. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
just to simplify the game a little bit back in that back end, it's just get the puck out quickly and don't make a mistake, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I know that sounds simple, but really that's kind of the mentality. And the thing is, I love talking to Ryan McDonough about this stuff because you'll understand this. His uncle was Steve Walsh, right? So,
sure.
um, you know, and he learned a lot from that quarterback mentality of picking the brain of his uncle of like, you know, there's a sort of calmness that you need in
Mm-hmm.
very stressful situations, and quarterbacks have that. Really good defensemen have it.
Yeah,
And you know your reads. You know the play that you make here. You know the play you make there, and he lives it. And combine that with just the fact that he's just I know the term warrior in sports is used a lot and probably overused, but it really is fitting for him with the way that he just is such a stalwart back there, the way he blocks shots, the way he dominates on the penalty kill. And I mean a plus 43
plus
plus minus ratio,
43.
yeah, is
God.
no joke. You know what I mean? Like sometimes that stat can be, you know it might be a little inflated one way or the other,
Yeah.
but that when you're leading the entire league, in that stat, that says something. So and again, he's just been such a calming influence on a lot of those younger guys who really haven't seen, Eric Chernak has, obviously Victor Hedman has, but a lot of these guys haven't really seen a lot of those playoff moments. Darren Radish, Nick Perbix, Emil Lilleberg, like those guys, they're still kind of they're looking for their first playoff series win. JJ Mosier too, this is his first time in the playoffs. So yeah, I think it's going to be really important for those two guys and the experience they have. I think more than 350 games between them in the playoffs, and obviously a few Stanley Cups along the way, is that calmness and how these guys can kind of calm the ship, especially when it gets a little crazy. And the team they're playing this starting tomorrow is a team that can make you go crazy, because of the way they've kind of evolved the 180 under Paul Maurice, and they used to be this team that was constantly on the rush and just
Mm-hmm.
was like fast breaking and everything like that. Now they love to dump the puck and chase it, and what that means is basically you've got to beat them to the puck. They like to get the puck behind the defenseman, and the defenseman, it's their main job is to get that puck and get it out. And like I said, it sounds simple in some degrees, but it's not easy, especially when you have a team that's fast and physical like the Panthers are. I mean, I think they kind of rode that to the Stanley Cup, to winning the Stanley Cup last year, and they're going to be kind of the same kind of team. So, I thought that was a fitting story to kind of kick off going into game one, because a lot
Absolutely.
of teams, we talk so much about the firepower that this team has, and
Sure.
we've written a lot about it and everything like that. But really, we saw it when they won the cups. We saw it when they went to 3 straight finals. It's the ability to keep the puck out of your own net, and not just that, but facilitate the possession of the puck in your own end to create offense. And I think that's really the way that the Lightning have shown that they can win this year, and that they're going to have to keep showing that they can win throughout the postseason if they want to, have another one of those deep postseason runs.
Yeah, I just, I remember during those Stanley Cup runs when they won the cup, it was if they had a 1 goal lead in the third period, you felt like, Ed, that it was over.
Yeah,
You felt like they're
yeah,
going to choke this team out, and they're going to go 200 feet on every single possession, and they're not going to get any good looks. You just had that feeling. So you mentioned just briefly there, the offense has always, gets the headlines. And listen, Nikita Kucherov has done things in this league that only Hall of Famers do, and he'll be one
mhm,
day. To win another scoring title, the way he's done it, not from the center position, to score the number of goals that he's had. Everybody talks about how hard he works in the off season, and that always sounds good. But you guys get to see it. We don't. Um, I don't know. I don't know at what point his game will start to dip. But Florida's obviously going to have to pay an awful lot of attention to Kucherov. What do you expect them to try to do to him in this series?
Yeah, I think what they're going to try to do is frustrate him. To be honest,
Yeah.
it's kind of putting that pressure on him at the blue line. And again, just kind of going back to that dump and chase game. I think that's kind of what the Lightning kind of have to do too. It's like the less time. It sounds weird, but the less time you have the puck on your stick, but still moving it forward, the less opportunity. What he says, like, it takes risk out of your game, right? And then you just have to make sure you win the battles, right? You win the puck battles, on the forecheck, in the offensive zone and stuff like that. So, Nikita Kucherov loves the puck on a stick, right? But he's also good at taking the puck off the wall. He's also good at seeing the ice without the puck on a stick. So I think it's going to be more key to that. I think that the Panthers are going to try to come at him hard at the blue line when he's trying to make these entries and through the neutral zone and stuff. I think they're going to do have all the guys. I think they're trying to Braden Point, and I think that's one thing that the Lightning have kind of struggled with every once in a while. And to get out of those funks, they basically revert to that dump and chase, which is just fling it over and race to the puck and beat the other guys in the puck battles on the sides and the corners. And I think that's why to be honest, that top six is going to be important, and especially that that Cirelli line, because that's what they do. They're the matchup line. They're going to be the one that's going to be playing the top line for most of the time, and they're going to be the ones that are be kind of called on, to kind of dictate the possession and keep it in the offensive zone. And I kind of like what they've done recently with putting Jake Gensel on that line too, because he's just such a sound and smart player that he can really kind of fit in with those guys with Hagel and Cirelli too. So it's kind of a little bit different look because Hagel's been on that. Because Gensel's been on that line with Point and Kucherov for most of the season. But Yanni Gourde's there right now, and it can always change. But Yanni Gourde definitely adds a little bit of a different look too, not necessarily a Gensel look. He's almost kind of like a smaller Andre Palat, which I think is something that they need too. They need a guy to do the dirty work to, get in the corners, battle for the puck, and get the puck to guys like Point and Kucherov in space. So that's something that they've kind of been missing a little bit since Andre Palat left. He's kind of that guy who does the dirty work on that top line. So, and we know how well that worked out for so many years. So, but yeah, I think, to answer your question, I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on Kucherov, trying to make him turn over the puck, force him into some bad plays and odd man rushes. If the Lightning can avoid those kind of mistakes, I think they've got a good chance of winning this series. I mean, all the numbers, they're just talking to some of the analytics guys and everything, the Lightning are as good as they played, as good as the numbers say, they actually probably should be better, in terms of deserve more points and deserve some even better stats statistically, because they did go through a rough January where, they were creating chances and they just weren't going in, having some bad breaks. Stuff like that. It was that 16 games in 29 days. And it was a brutal stretch in January. But since then, they've been one of the best teams in the league. And not just in terms of wins and losses, but also in terms of, offense, defense, scoring chances, expected goals, stuff like that. So, I mean, I think it'll be a great series. I think that, at first you're kind of like, oh, Florida again. But I think the closer you get to this thing, it's like, oh, this is going to be, another really good series between two really good teams. And, don't forget that, the Panthers are a little bit, they've got a little bit of reason a lot of reason actually to stick out their chest a little bit more now, because they know they've gotten there. They've been to the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. They won it last year. They know exactly what it takes to get through the grind. It used to be the Lightning were the team that knew that and the Panthers weren't, but it's a little bit different now that the Panthers do. So I think you add that kind of context to it, and you're going to get a really good series of two teams that, have that postseason experience and a lot more than you'll probably see in a lot more of these other, first round series. And I think it'll show itself.
A couple of minutes left, but I wanted to ask you, you mentioned Jake Gensel, and I mean, it doesn't seem that long ago there was some hand-wringing over Steven Stamkos going to Nashville, and you look at this team, you look at all the scoring that they have and the defense that they played. If Julien Brisebois doesn't win Executive of the Year, then something is wrong, I think, the way he has rebuilt this team. I looked at The Athletic, and they had like 8 writers picking the finals, and I think 7 of them picked the Lightning to make it to the Stanley Cup and maybe 4 or 5 to win it.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that the roster needed retooling, and it needed retooling for a couple of reasons. One, because they need to become better defensively, but also too because they need to create some more. They need to get younger. They needed to get a little bit faster, and I think Julian did that by making some tough decisions. And he obviously took a lot of criticism early on for letting Stamkos walk, and I know he had what the idea of what Steven Stamkos' value was, and he's very shrewd with those decisions, and but he's, for the most of the part, he's right when he makes those assessments. And not only that, but that's a tough trade to make when you trade Mikhail Sergachev, who was essentially tabbed to be the top defenseman of the future, 26 years old, and you're able to get a guy like JJ Mosier, who's 24, can play both sides, on the left side and right side, and I think you've seen him play a lot, different positions, and might be a better defenseman in terms of defense than maybe Mikhail is. He's not the offensive guy that Mikhail Sergachev is, but the focus was always getting better defensively, and I think Mosier hits that. And again, like the McDonough trade, I think you're right in the sense that it totally turned everything around. And in a lot of ways, not only do you get the player and everything he does, but you allow everyone else to slot in into their into better, probably natural roles. And Victor Hedman doesn't have to play as many minutes. He's not playing as many minutes on the penalty kill. You're able to match McDonough and Chernak, who was kind of a little bit lost without McDonough in where he really kind of fit on the right side in the pairings. And now he's back with McDonough. Those guys play against the top assignment minutes, just like the Sorelli line. So and then you're able to put some of those less experienced guys, the Radishes, the Lillebergs, the Perbixes, down low a little bit, maybe where they're better slotted instead of in top or second pairing. So what he's done, and again, Gensel, they have him for the next 7 years, and they got younger. If you're comparing him to Steven Stamkos, and obviously they're different players, different games. But if you told me that Jake Gensel was going to have 41, 42 goals this year and lead the league in power play goals, which really hasn't been his strength,
right?
And obviously he scores them different than Steven Stamkos does, but he's just always in the right place at the right time. But if you told me that, like anyone would take that, and I think be very, very happy with it. So he's done a great job with these moves, and they weren't easy. He took a lot of criticism for them early on, and even from us,
sure,
this is the face of your franchise you're letting walk, but it's all worked out, and for sure they're a better team.
They are. He's Eduardo Encina. You can read him in the Tampa Bay Times on tampabay.com. Game 1 of the Lightning against the Florida Panthers, and I can't wait for it to get started. Eddie, thanks for joining me, man. We'll talk to you soon. Can't wait for this game between the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning in Amalie Arena. Of course,
you'll have to wait a while.
I'm going to have to wait a long time for you.
It's an 8:48 puck drop.
Can't believe it, man. So, okay, the game's 2.5, and then you're probably another hour and a half. So we'll be talking to you the next day at about 2:00 in the morning.
Well, you're assuming there's no overtime.
Oh, God, that's right. Because it's not the traditional 3-on-3 overtime or the shootout. It's full period overtime, right?
It goes till someone scores.
Yeah, which we've seen it go 5 of those before.
Yes, we have.
Hopefully not. Hopefully that's not the case, but it is exciting. And I think there's a lot of pressure on the home team. I know you want home ice if you get to a Game 7. That's preferred over maybe not having it. But by the same token, I've always believed that, when you start on the road, you're kind of playing with house money. You just get one of those, and now you have home ice, and, you got to win on the road. This way, you almost feel like you have to hold serve.
Yep.
To not lose home ice advantage. So there's a lot of pressure on the Lightning. Home crowd will be into it. A lot of expectations.
You do. You have to hold serve. But if you do hold serve, and you go to their place up 2-0, they have to win 4 of 5 to advance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's the other side of why you want home ice advantage, right? If you can. And let's be honest, the Lightning have been a much better home team than they are on the road.
They've been one of the best in hockey.
Right. So the home crowd is worth something.
They've been about a 500 team on the road. They've been really good at home.
Yeah, right. Very good. So hopefully, if you're them, you want that to hold, and you're playing in front of your fans. They'll be geeked up. Like, this is a good hockey team. Like I said, 7 out of 8 athletic writers picked them to go to the Eastern Conference Final. A bunch of them picked them to win the Stanley Cup. These are people that follow hockey, do the analytics, all of that. And I think, as we spoke with Ed, having Andre Vasilevsky back to his usual form, even though he's not 100%. But if he can get another 1% or 2% as he goes forward, that's going to be good enough. And, the defense has been stellar. So, yeah, it's just a matter of whether they can come out and play their game and get a lead and see if they can sit on it and, kind of close teams out the way they did when they won Stanley Cup. So that'll be fun to listen for. The Rays are in Arizona. Thank God they got out of Steinbrenner Field after a 13-game homestand that did not go their way. Not that Arizona's any pushover. That's a really good baseball team out there, but hopefully their bats wake up, so they'll try to get that done. And we are just 2 days away from the NFL draft. That's on Thursday night. The Bucs pick at 19th overall. We'll talk a lot about that the rest of the week as well. Thanks for listening. Make sure you go see our friends at Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Check out the beautiful watches they have there, men's and women's watches, sports watches for your wife, your girlfriend, the Navatimers, the Chronomats, the NFL anniversary watches, all 32 teams while supplies last. It's Breitling Boutique. Make sure you let them know you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. Or Steve Versnick, I am Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Have a great day, everybody.